to order, and we'll get started. Because we've got an attendees list, we don't need to do a round of introductions beyond turning it over to our esteemed Deputy County Manager, Karen Francois.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I do want to thank you for the opportunity for us to be here today to share with you the evaluation of the work that we've done with the CARES dollars to ensure that our residents would be able to continue receiving county services during the months from about the middle to the end of 2020. That's the period of time that the evaluation covers. And those were in the earlier days of the pandemic. You have the agenda in front of you. We're going to talk about what we did. We'll share the results of the evaluation, and we'll share resulting recommendations. And then we'll also be providing you with a brief update on where we are now. Today, joining me, and I think this is the first time I will have had the opportunity to introduce to the board our new director of IPR administration, where Enterprise Services is housed. And you all know her. She may be new to IPR, but she's been with the county and has just done amazing work throughout the county for the past 7 years, I believe. Yeah. Katrina Mosser, she is our new director of IPR administration. She's going to be doing part of the presentation today. Melinda Donaway, you've all met her already. She is the manager for Enterprise Services. And I'm pretty sure everybody in the county knows Dana DeMaster, who has been working really hard with us on this evaluation. So I am going to now, let's see, is someone going to be sharing their screen? Who is that?
I was asking this question right as we were starting, because this is my first time doing this type of workshop. So I'm assuming I should share mine now because one of us needs to share. So
yes,
I will bring it up now.
And while you do that, I'll buy you 15 seconds by saying, if you're wondering what happened to Tara Bach, she's the previous director of IPR administration. She's still with us. She is now working in finance as a part of the back office team. We are building, after learning from the CARES work, a more like front to back end approach to how we do our work across contracting, finance, and accounting. And she's working directly with the CFO on that work. So Tara's still with us, just in a new role as well. Wanted to make sure we could connect those dots.
And oh, by the way, she misses us so much at IPR that she was over here today working in one of our conference rooms. So she might be gone over to finance, but she's still, her heart still belongs to IPR. So yeah, can you all see the presentation? All right. I am now then going to turn it over to Katrina.
Great, thank you. And thanks for your patience with the technology thing. Even after a year and a half, we're all still learning, right? So thanks, and thank you for the warm welcome, Karen. I'm really happy to be in my new role as the director of IPR administration. And as Karen said, I've worked with many of you, or all of you, in different roles over the past, it's about 6.5 years, Karen. So I'm really glad to be with you now in this role, and also be presenting today with Karen and Melinda and Dana. So excited to get into this. I will move forward just to talk about a few key takeaways from today's workshop. And first of all, I want to kind of stress, as Deputy County Manager Francois said, that this presentation, or this evaluation, is from August to December of 2020. So you already know that we've adapted and developed the enterprise services work since that time. Not only moving from service delivery redesign to calling it enterprise services, but also some of the changes that we brought to you all back in March before I was in this role, but I've had the opportunity to watch that workshop. And so some of the things we'll be talking about have already changed since the evaluation was done, and just really serves to strengthen this first takeaway of that we're continue to develop and adapt the enterprise services work to meet the needs of our residents, and including learning from this evaluation, but also continuing to learn from what residents and staff throughout the county are bringing back to us as we adapt and develop these services. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank not only Deputy County Manager Francois, but also Karen Shea, who was the interim director for enterprise services, and all the work that Melinda and her team has done, and Dana and her team has done to allow us to already be adapting and changing and meeting the needs of our residents as we go and continue to improve enterprise services. What we heard loud and clear through not only this evaluation, but through a lot of the work of enterprise services, and also informed from residents first, was that residents want to choose where and how they access county services. And that's where we want to move to, so that all channels are available, whether it be through phone, virtual, in-person, mail, whatever the channel may be, that residents can access the services how and where they want to, and when they want to. And that communication and partnership with community and trusted organizations is going to be key now and into the future as we continue to transform service delivery and the enterprise services division. So as a bit of a reminder, we've kind of touched on this already, but so we have a bit of a foundation as we go into today. The work of enterprise services really came out of the residents first strategic priority, and also this pivot we did and work that was done with under CARES funding and the incident management team to do the service delivery redesign. And that has, both of those have now informed and developed enterprise services, and our objective to really transform how the county delivers services by engaging residents and employees to provide the best possible resident experience and outcomes. So some of this part was brought to you guys in March in that committee of the whole, but just wanted to revisit that as a foundation for today's work or today's presentation. So I will now hand this over to Melinda to talk about some of the work we've done to date.
All right, thank you, Katrina, Madam Chair, Commissioners, good to be here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did. And as you all know, we have established 5 service centers now, and now we have 3 service centers, and much of our work is within community partner sites that offer critical services in person during a time when counties around us were sending staff home. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the initial redeployed staff that played a critical role in carrying this vision until now. They were redeployed in the heart of the summertime. They showed heart, commitment, and vision during a tumultuous, scary time, both in our work professionally and in our personal lives. So I just want to give a little shout out for all of the work that they put in and the heart and commitment that brought us to this point as well. The initial services that the navigators were trained in are workforce solutions, financial assistance services, social services, and property tax services. So as we discussed in the March Committee of the Whole update, we've seen the need for navigators to be within community partner sites, and we've made this pivot. I'm excited to share that we're now up to 6 partner sites at about 44 hours on a weekly basis. Staff and services, we're staff service centers with navigators who will act as a guide to county services and ensure residents get the services that they need. Navigators and support staff are now permanently established within information and public records. We had community participate in our interviewing for navigators, and we have an enterprise services staff that's reflective of Ramsey County, including multiple languages, races, and abilities. And almost cut down evenly, 8 internal staff and 8 external staff. Residents, staff, external partners, neighbors, and family members can now receive navigator assistance through service centers, a navigator call center, and an online navigator referral or in our community partner sites. When we provide technology at service centers so that residents can connect online to job applications, searches, or other internet needs. Navigators did a huge heavy lift in providing technology availability at service centers. Given the backdrop of the pandemic, navigators and support staff feverishly sanitized equipment all day, 5 days a week. After each use, they played a huge role in physically keeping buildings open with keys and door codes and complex alarm systems, truly the jack of all trades. And that's continuing today, filling in where there's a need and finding ways to make residents' experience of Ramsey County the best. And together we built an innovative team structure. The supervisors, we have 3 supervisors who work together to supervise the entire team within the service centers and at partner site locations. Supervisors are not signed to a specific site. Staff rotate from site to site and supervisors do the same thing. So the incentive truly is to support all sites, make sure they're all functioning excellently, and to support the entire team towards success. And we're really proud of the way that we're able to collaborate as a team and the way that the leaders are able to support the team in this unique way. Next.
I think now hand it over to Dana to start to present some of the findings from the evaluation.
Thank you, Melinda and Katrina, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Like this morning with Sarah's presentation on the small business, I won't spend too much time going over each of the evaluation questions, but note that rather than doing an evaluation focused on outcomes or what performance measurements or things like that, we really wanted to focus this evaluation on the process and really using this time of experimentation and using this time when this service was new, as well as, like Melinda said, happening in the heart of the pandemic. If we think about where we were in November with, case rates as high as they ever were and shutdowns happening, what are we learning in this moment that can inform the next couple of years? So rather than focusing on outcomes, we really focused on that learning aspect of this. You can go on to the next slide, but I'll go through each of the individual questions as we go through. For this evaluation, we used a bunch of different methods. First of all, we had some quantitative data from a spreadsheet that was put together for navigators to use to track traffic at their sites. This was usable through October, but then as I'll mention later, it became difficult to use that. And so we don't have data, quantitative data after that. We did a resident survey in the service centers. It was paper. Navigators handed it out as people visited, and we had 114 completed surveys with about a 27% response rate of known visits to the service centers in that same time period. We did interviews with all the original navigators as well as their supervisors, and interviews with the 10 embedded financial workers who were at the library and the West Side location. Downtown, workers at the downtown site were there by lottery. And so many financial workers, there was more than 60 that did at least one shift. And so rather than interviewing someone who may have only worked one shift, we did a survey of those workers with a 50% response rate. So you can go on to the next slide. So the first question we asked was, what have we learned in these first 6 months from August to December to inform and improve our practices over the next few years? And so, some of the major findings that were that traffic to service centers outside of downtown was really limited. Other than like the libraries, there was a regular traffic of people using the computers as they always had at the library. But other sites, there were not very many people coming in for the needs we think of when we think of someone who's looking to talk to a navigator. Residents really go to the places that they've always gone for services. And so despite, social media, signs, messaging, those types of things, that's tough to change 30 years of practice of when you have, needs to apply for SNAP or to update your childcare, you go downtown. And that's where people were going. We really found that navigators, like at the beginning, the navigator and the service center concept were really intermeshed, and that these navigators were integral to the service centers. But as Melinda mentioned, we've expanded beyond that now into community and partner sites. And so that was something we found, that the navigators and the service centers are not the same, and they're not intermeshed. And the service center, some of the residents' first work that undergirds this was the whole notion that any building should be the right building, and that you shouldn't have a building-centric model to providing services. And so the service center model was still a building-centric model, and somewhat necessary due to the pandemic and not being able to have everything open, but nonetheless, it was not necessarily resident-centric in that way. And so there is that need to be where residents are. So where are people going when they have needs, and go to those places? And so that's a transition that Melinda and her team has already been making. There was not a lot of clarity about the role of the navigators. When we asked navigators what their role was, they saw themselves as, higher level staff with a strong background and knowledge of county services, and really being able to handle complex needs. And they were oftentimes, out of necessity, as Melinda was saying, keeping the computers usable and sanitized, but then also sort of tasked with greeter kind of roles, partially based on where they were located in the building. If they're the first person you see when you walk in, and you're just there to drop off a ballot, there is sort of that greeter role. Or when I interviewed the people at working over at Plato, they were sitting where the security guard had previously sat. And so workers returning to work, to their offices occasionally, or people who had frequented the building in the past, were used to seeing a security guard there and sort of assumed the navigator was a security guard. But there's a lot of confusion about, what is this new position? How do we work together, both internally with other subject matter expert staff, as well as with the public? And so that was kind of a confusion. And then finally, really, the navigator had limited authority and limited ability to actually act on resident requests in real time. And so, for example, someone comes in to drop off their property taxes. Navigators couldn't give a receipt, or they weren't able to take cash. And so, as simple as that, we're being able to follow through that transaction all the way through. Those were some of the things they weren't able to do. And in terms of more complex things, if they're making a referral onto another county worker or another programmer area, the ability to follow up and really see what happened, or to update, I had a conversation with this person about their SNAP, and being able to case note that in Maxis, so their financial worker would know that had happened. Those are some of the limits of their scope and authority that kind of drove or contributed to some of that lack of clarity. Next slide, please. Here are some of the quotes that we, in our interviews with the navigators, some of the things they said. And they really saw that, I feel like there's a lack of definition around the role of a navigator. I feel the boundaries aren't clear. I feel we have a vision that is unclear. And really noting that initial excitement about this redeployment opportunity into what was often seen as a promotion or seen as a career laddering step, some of that initial excitement wore off as they were in these sort of greeting, front desk kind of clerical roles oftentimes. And many of them said, I'm concerned we're a middleman. And so what is our authority to act? Or are we just here to refer people elsewhere? Are we a door on the way to another door? Was what many of them were saying. Let's go on to the next slide. Our next question, the evaluation question, was, what is the resident experience of the service centers and navigators, and how does this compare to other ways of accessing services? About a quarter of the residents who were surveyed visited multiple times a month. And so you kind of had two groups, and there's a figure following this one about this. Those who were using computers both at the libraries, who kind of had always used those computers, and people coming in for scanning and copying and computer use downtown. But then also the FAS services, many of those people accessing that were coming in multiple times per month with questions or needs they weren't getting met over the phone or in other ways. Downtown users are a fairly unique group compared to the very few users at the suburban sites. Downtown users are less likely to have home internet. They feel less comfortable online, preferring to seek services in person, much more likely to use public transportation and be experiencing homelessness. An issue in downtown in particular was the lack of telephones, so personal telephones, and so the ability to get a call back. So if the navigator was able to answer someone's question that had to refer them on to someone else, residents often had nowhere they could receive a call back in an hour or the next day. And so that challenge of how to get those needs met immediately and promptly without having the ability to have the phone. And I can note that in the downtown service center, there's always been a bank of phones in the lobby. So you can call a financial worker or call within Ramsey County. And those were not in use because of concerns about COVID and having to sanitize those phones. We asked residents to rate their customer service they received, and people said that they received good customer service, they were treated respectfully, they got their needs met. And that was, almost all 5 stars. But the navigators, said they felt oftentimes that they were a stop on the way to another door. If you go on to the next slide, here's a few of the highlights from some of the surveys we did. And so in terms of home internet access, overall, nearly half of the people who visited the service centers said they always had home internet access, but that really varied by site. Downtown, only 38% always have home internet and 29% never have it. And so that lack of internet service is very real for the downtown users. I will note that Maplewood elections, so the survey happened in October when we had those lines down the block of people dropping off ballots. And so we instructed the navigators not to give surveys to people who were just dropping off a ballot, but there was a few times that those were given out on accident. And so the Maplewood site, we separated out those responses for people who were just there to drop off a ballot. So nonetheless, home internet access is an ongoing issue for many people. On the next slide, it shows how many times people had visited the service centers in the last month by what their need was. And so as I mentioned, that people who are using the computers come often. I heard stories about, senior citizens who don't have computers at home going to the library to use those resources. But then also the financial assistance resources, the need for income, food, and childcare. Half of visitors for that reason came more than once a month, and nearly a third came 2 to 3 times a month to get those needs met. Many people using the computer came in, daily, even sometimes, or weekly. A few more navigator voices. I think that we are really a stop on the way to another door kind of hits that home about that first couple of months of experience and poses one of the biggest, I don't know if it's a challenge, but just one of the things to really consider going forward is how do we have that role not be a stop on the way to another door? And so what does that mean in terms of service provision? And our final question was, what are the training and support needs of navigators to successfully serve residents? You can go to the next slide, Katrina. Overall, navigators were really pleased with their training. This was the initial group that was redeployed, and they had a fairly intensive 5-day training covering those areas that Melinda had mentioned of FAS, social services, property tax, and workforce. And they thought at the time that those were what they needed. They also specifically mentioned the courts and child support as areas that they got frequent questions about. And so the need to be able to answer basic questions about courts and making child support payments. Their greatest area of need was more training on Maxis and FAS in general, which has very complex federal and state rules and the understanding needed to effectively answer questions there. And really wanting more hands-on training, like doing vignettes, case scenarios where they could practice entering information into the different databases or understanding or reading, since most of the time they didn't have access to actually change things. And then also the need for refresher trainings on seasonal issues. And so the need for information about voting was very high in October and November, but probably won't be again until next October or November. And the same thing with property taxes, where that's coming up twice a year. And so anticipating those seasonal needs and doing those refresher courses at that time.
Dana, before you jump on, I see Commissioner McDonough has his hand up. Jim, is it on this point? Do you want to ask your question?
No, I'll wait till the end. I got a
Okay.
few comments, but
Okay,
it was on a point that, but that's fine. I'll wait
Okay.
till the end. Thank you.
okay, great. All right, I'll let you continue.
And so like the other evaluations, we had some short-term recommendations and some long-term recommendations. Katrina, you can move the slide forward. And so on here, Katrina and Melinda added, the actions either they've already taken on these or kind of what some of the next steps are in these areas. And so I'll go through the recommendations and then they'll kind of discuss what's happening next. But in short term, really finding opportunities to provide navigator services outside the service centers. And so not only at community organizations and being where the people are, but also including the virtual and user managed options. And so how do we provide online or text-based for those who would prefer that? Really targeting word of mouth marketing and outreach. And so while the social media and some of those, the media campaigns and signage were good, to change decades of one way of getting service, it's really got to be through word of mouth. And so as people gain experience coming to our service centers or interacting with a navigator, how do we build on that? And also through things like religious institutions, existing community groups, schools. And so letting people know that this is a different way that you can now access services. Really enhancing that collaboration between enterprise services and other departments and getting to some of the clarity around what a navigator is and what they do and how that builds on and complements the work of department staff or subject matter experts. And so they're not, I don't think there's any competition, so competition is not the right word, but that they're building on each other's skill sets in a way that is helpful to the residents as well as the other departments. For downtown, many times the navigators were answering really basic questions, giving forms, who is my financial worker, what form do I need to complete, things like that, that may be better in a traditional customer service representative type role. And so really thinking in, who's coming down and what are those needs? And so there are people who just need a quick question answered versus those who have maybe more in-depth, complicated financial assistance specific needs versus people who might have a multitude of needs where really that navigator is going to be an asset. And so getting that person connected with child support, financial assistance, mental health counseling over at social services. So being able to have that conversation with someone and really get them going in the right direction. And then finally, in the short term, working with IS and then the navigators to develop a short-term data tracking system. What we put together for this in the middle of the pandemic, was a Microsoft form that was capturing what we thought we needed. And we've learned since then that there are things that maybe we were asking we didn't need to, and that for workers in particular downtown, they were too busy to stop and enter all this information after every interaction. And so usage dropped off. And so really finding a way to capture the types of data that Melinda and her supervisors need to be able to staff appropriately and understand traffic and understand what the needs are. And not even so much as an evaluative component, but just that daily business analytics in understanding their work. So those are the short-term recommendations. I know Melinda and Katrina, do you want to talk about some of the actions and next steps, and then we can go on to long-term recommendations?
Great. Thank you, Dana. So yeah, I'll start going through some of the actions, next steps in response to these recommendations. Melinda, please jump in where there are points where I might miss something, there's something to add. So for the first one, the first recommendation listed on there about exploring opportunities to provide navigator services outside of service centers. As we updated you in March, we've already implemented some of that, and we're continuing to work on that. So navigator services are being provided at all our shelter locations and at the St. Paul Opportunity Center. And Melinda and her team of supervisors and navigators are, even today, and over the past few months, working to continue to reach out to, develop, and explore partnerships with other potential community partners. And one thing I think I want to note here on behalf of that team and Melinda, and like I said, please jump in, Melinda, if there's anything to add, is that just as we were not seeing a huge number of people coming into our buildings during COVID, our partners in the community were also not seeing that. So we might reach out to one of our trusted partners or a new site or organization that we think we might be able to work with. And they were saying, yeah, that sounds great, but people aren't coming here right now. So now, as you know, some of the COVID restrictions are being lifted and the vaccination rates are getting higher, more people, just like we're seeing in our buildings, more people are coming for in-person services. So this is the right time, and we're well positioned now in enterprise services to continue to explore those options and figure out how we want to partner. And I'd also stress there, we also want to figure out the best way to partner that doesn't necessarily require in-person services. You know, people weren't coming for in-person services always during COVID, and that doesn't mean that at post-COVID, that's what the solution is that they want. So we want to develop many avenues or channels for someone to access services. That includes the Navigator phone line that we established and talked about previously with you, and also work to ensure that, or just like a resident doesn't have a wrong door, that they don't have a wrong phone number to call. So that there is a phone number that can be called to access services in Ramsey County, and the resident can get to and access the services that they need. So that's working with the Navigator phone line and the 8500 number and the FAS number and all of that to explore how we better consolidate and better use that, also our new phone voice over IP functionality to make sure that residents are able to access the services they need. Do you have anything to add there, Melinda, or?
No, I think that's right. I think our partnership with partner sites is going to look different as we're all figuring out how to come back to normalcy. So it might be a mix or a hybrid of in-person and virtual collaborations across other community organizations. So
thanks. And for the second recommendation on targeted word of mouth, just as Dana said, that there's a evolution and a culture change to get to the kind of service delivery that we envision for the future. And so that is not only developing those partnerships with community in terms of how and where we provide services, but also doing more communication and outreach. I see that distinction between partner locations or satellite locations, or however we want to call it, and outreach and communication to get the message out and work with trusted community partners to really develop and understand how we can better connect residents to services, again, where and how they want to connect. For enhancing that collaboration between enterprise services and other departments, with the services that we have onboarded, so workforce solutions, financial assistance services, and social services, and property tax, we've completed an evaluation or a review of where we are at now in terms of onboarding those services and where we want to go. What is the desired state that we get to, and then working through how we get there now. We want to make sure that the current services that we've onboarded are adding value, not being that additional layer that a navigator is adding, but the navigator is helping to connect residents with county services and a value add for those residents with the services that are already onboarded, and then using that as a way to troubleshoot as we continue to develop those services and navigator offerings, and the continuous improvement philosophy taken to it. And then also as we onboard and expand to additional services that we can learn from the existing services to onboard new ones. For the staffing, particularly about downtown and the staffing model downtown, we are working with all of the departments that are currently part of or have a role in service delivery at the downtown building, and really looking to model how that an integrated service delivery can look in the future. As Dana has already commented, people come to the East Building because that's where they know to come to access various county services. So how do we, in a kind of post-pandemic way, continue to provide that service for residents in an effective way, and also in an integrated way? We know Workforce Solutions will be in that building, Enterprise Services will be there, Social Services is there, Financial Assistance is there. So how do we all work together to provide a seamless service delivery for residents when they choose to come to that building? And for working with IS and others to continue to develop a tracking system. We are continuing to use the form that Dana referenced that was created at the beginning. We're updating it. We just had a discussion this morning about updating some of the fields on there to make it applicable to what we need to know and the data we need to know now to help not only Enterprise Services, but the entire county to adjust and meet the needs of residents. And then we'll be working with, or are working with IS and other partners to develop a more robust tracking system that includes working with Dana on results-based accountability and continuing to refine how we will track data and performance measures, and working with community to understand what they want us to track as well, so that, you know, when we're using the open data portal, that we're actually conveying data and information that is valuable and informative to our community members and residents, you know, when we put forth the effort to track it and put it online. So Belinda, did you have anything to add to the recommendations I went through?
No, that was awesome.
You want to go on to the long-term, Katrina?
Sure.
On their face, I read through the long-term and they look an awful lot like the short-term, but some of it has more to do with depth and longevity than it does anything else. And so, you know, really regularly reviewing and adapting the training to ensure that navigators can meet the needs of residents, and ensuring they're getting those refresher trainings is going to be important, and especially as new services come on and that reminder about different things. In terms of tracking, there needs to be something better than a Microsoft form that can talk to our other systems. And so that, you know, navigators, but then also other staff know that this person interacted with the navigator, and we're able to get a more complete picture of that resident experience through data sharing where it's appropriate. And so the Enterprise Services is part of the charter group of the Residents First Human Services Modernization Project that will be starting in the coming year. And so it's critical that they are engaged in this, and so that those newly emerging data are captured, and we have a way to really holistically use data to respond to resident need and kind of understand where people are using multiple services or where people are interacting. And so engaging with that project in the long term. Continuing that enhancement and the collaboration between navigators and the other departments. So as we bring on new services and new departments, continuing that collaboration and reviewing and regularly reviewing where we are in terms of those existing relationships and what is changing or needs to change, and how are those relationships, both from an internal perspective, but also from a resident perspective. And then finally, really having that separate the navigator role from the physical service center. And so I was thinking about this a lot, and I think many things in this evaluation raise more questions than it actually answers. But they're important questions to continue to try to address and think about. So this is bigger than navigators, and it's bigger than service centers. And so if we really are residents first and any door is the right door, what does that mean post-pandemic as more of our buildings open? If someone shows up at the vital records office, not to pick on them, but would they get the same kind of level of service or referral and understanding of county services they might get if they showed up somewhere else? And so no matter where someone goes, is there a way to ensure they're getting what they need, regardless of what building it's at? And that existing staff who aren't navigators, how do they know enough to know when to refer someone or when to make that handoff? And so that training and that culture, how do we spread that countywide to all frontline staff? And so that's really kind of what that's about. And the residents, as I said, a lot of people don't have internet who are coming downtown, but there's also a whole lot of people who are used to banking online and shopping on Amazon and paying their property taxes online and doing all these things. And so how do we modernize our system so that residents can access what they need, at 3 a.m. online versus 9 a.m. downtown in person or over the phone? How do we make that move that helps us on our goal to transform the way we do our work and really meeting residents' needs wherever they are and however they want to access them? And so, navigators are kind of a linchpin in some of that, but how do we give that same level of service regardless of what phone number they call or regardless of what door they walk into? And so this evaluation doesn't answer those questions, but I think raises more questions about that. So that's my piece. I'll hand it back to Melinda and Katrina to talk through what their next steps are in these areas.
Thank you, Dana. So for the first recommendation here about training, we have already adapted from the original training that we've done and continuing to do that. And that is from learning over the past 6+ months. And as we've talked about previously, as we hired our permanent enterprise services staff, or the current enterprise services staff, that all started in April, I believe, Melinda, right, a little before me, so that the training that they got looked a little bit different than the training that was done, in 2020, as we're continuing to learn and adapt. And one big piece of that, and we did talk with you about in March, is that spirit of service training, and really embedding that in the work that we do and the approach that is taken by all of the enterprise services staff. And another piece that we heard, not only in this evaluation, but also with working with our advisory councils, is also really embedding the racial equity work in enterprise services and taking a trauma-informed approach as we work with residents. And so those are pieces that we want to continue to develop and adapt and learn how we can provide that training when people are starting as navigators or customer support assistants, but also recognize that those are going to need to be ongoing training as well. That's something that is a evolution for all of us as we learn how to restructure and eliminate racial disparities in our county. Is something that we need to all continue to work on. So that's something we're developing. And also, there's a lot of interest from other departments, and so truly enterprise-wide, to do a lot of those trainings together and develop how we have a consistent approach to racial equity and trauma-informed care and the spirit of service across the entire county. So I'm hoping there's some real great opportunities there to partner across the county with different departments on those trainings. For the engaging with the residents' first human services modernization project, Dana touched on that. Enterprise services is part of that project group, and we will be working with them as that work goes forward. For the collaboration between navigators and other departments, we have created advisory councils, which were presented to in March in the committee of the whole, both a senior advisory council, which is department directors, and an operational advisory council, which includes some managers and supervisors. And that includes representatives from across the county in all service teams. We continue to evaluate and build, as I mentioned on the last slide, how we are delivering the current services that are onboarded and what future onboarding of services looks like to fill gaps where they may be identified and improve collaboration and improve the resident outcomes when they interact with one of our navigators or enterprise services. For the last piece, I think, as Dana aptly put, a lot of the questions that were raised, and it's a big shift and a lot of work to be done. And it's not just on enterprise services. It's not just on residents first. It's on our entire county to continue that work. So our actions taken and next steps probably make it look like it's a quick next step. And I don't mean to minimize it. I know it's a lot of work to be done, but just to give you a touch or a little bit of kind of where we're going and how we're developing this. I see this being a big piece of developing that partnership with community and how we can deliver services and allow residents to access county services at the location or at the community center or library or church or wherever it might be that they are already coming to, so we can meet the residents where they're at. Is a big piece of that. The engagement and performance measures to understand how the residents are experiencing county services. So again, not to pick on Vital Records, but since Dana used that as an example, if someone goes to Vital Records and has one kind of experience, so we understand what that experience is, and did the resident leave being able to access and get the answers that they needed in terms of county services? And is it different if they went to 160 Kellogg, and understanding that so that we can start to move towards a unified and shared experience when somebody is walking it through one of our doors and trying to access county services. And the last bullet on there, enhance online services, that makes it look like it's really easy. I know that's a lot of technology and updates we need to do across the county, not only with the technology tools and resources that enterprise services has, but that also weaves right into the human services modernization project and so many other pieces of the county as we continue to enhance and develop online services for our residents. I'll take a quick pause to ask if Melinda has anything to add.
The only thing that I would add is, in that process of us understanding what the resident experience is, as separating the navigator roles from the physical service centers, is sort of developing like an information channel of what are those flags or trigger points that that tell us that our operations, the back offices of how we're structured, need to be kind of rearranged. So the resident experience is enhanced, but also doing the hard work of, thinking about the way that we're organized within our county structures. So I think that's going to be huge to think through as we enhance our data systems and how we're working together.
I also wanted to add here, Katrina, that, as we talk about developing partner locations in addition to service centers, when we came to the board earlier with an update on enterprise services, we talked a little bit about our phased approach for 2021 with regard to how we deliver our services through the enterprise services division. And that plan is well underway. We have increased the number of hours that we provide navigation services within our partner locations. Our plan within the next few months is to ramp up staffing so that we can increase the number of hours to, in this next phase, 144 hours in our partner locations. and hopefully at 36 locations per week. And then in that third phase of 2021, additional staffing to provide up to 184 hours at 46 locations per week. Like I said, that plan is well underway, and we hope that by the end of the year, we will be able to provide many more hours of navigation services embedded in community.
Chris, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Could you bump Commissioner McDonough back up, please? He made a tech change and was hoping you could do help from there.
Yep.
Thank you.
And if I have a final word, I should really thank Chris Kovler, who's here, as well as Tara Bach. Chris very kindly helped me get like tens of $1,000s worth of gift cards, and just the sheer number and size of them was so great, and was very kindly delivered them to me when she found out I was biking to Plato in the winter to come get all these gift cards. And she's like, no, I'll find you and bring you the gift cards. So she was incredibly helpful, that helped us get all these surveys. So I just thank her.
Thank you so much. And as we're waiting on, I think Commissioner McDonough is back with us, and he did have his hands up first for quite a while. And I know he was listening on multiple tech devices. So I just want to give him the chance if he's able to unmute. And we can't see him, but I see that he's on. Commissioner McDonough.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
Can you hear
we
me?
can.
Oh, okay. Yeah, usually I don't have these, but I didn't bring my battery charger to the office for so I'm doing this, and my iPad went down, and I'm on the laptop. For some reason, the camera's not working, but and I did miss some of the wrap up there, and some of this might be covered in there, but I wanted to just go back. Dana, I think it was in like 3, maybe 4 slides, and you might have mentioned it like 6 or 7 times, where navigators felt like this was just a stop to another door, right? To me, that's more about the clarity of the role. Because in my mind, especially if we're focused on residents first and we're trying to improve their interaction with the county, in the past, they may get to 7 doors and still not found someone to solve their problem. My hope, the navigator would get them to the door that would solve their problem. So I don't see the navigators as always being the problem solvers, but understanding where they get the resident to get their problem solved. And I think that might lack some clarity on what navigators were thinking their roles were, whether they're the problem solvers or are they really helping people get to the right places for the problem to be solved. And I'm not sure what the goals were when this was laid out. I really appreciate the opportunity, because this is one of those times where you kind of see all the things that maybe we're working a little bit, and then really trying to fit it and learn from it and build it as we go. Because I really like this concept, and I don't want us to lose it, but it needs to have value to the residents, right? And our employees who get into these roles need to feel like they're adding value. You talked a little bit about 30 years of changing on how they interact with us, right? And that barrier of people not really understanding the navigators. I couldn't agree more. I almost felt as I was listening to you and kind of the report out, it's like we need a marketing campaign. When they're standing in line at 160, we need a sign there that says, "Hey, don't stand in line. Call this number. This person can help you," right? And so I think it is about getting information out, but it's almost like we need a marketing campaign, because this is such a different approach for residents to access our service and get it problem solved. And then I know you probably talked a lot about it in the short and long-term goals, and that was where I was kind of missing. But I go back to, the workforce solutions evaluation, and I was really close to that work, right? Because I'm on the web, I work with Lang almost every day. And she had her workforce stuff in those 5 centers early on, but she actually moved into the community pretty quickly. And she was getting such a better response when she was like right at half, rather than trying to figure out, well, how do I get to the Maplewood Library? or she was right at Clues, or she was right in the community at community-based organizations that already have that trust and people were already coming to. And you probably already covered that in some of your thoughts about where to go next. But you know, to Ryan and to Karen and the leadership here, I really believe this is critical to us moving forward, is getting this right and refining it. I think, you know, the evaluation here that Dana laid out, and Katrina and Melinda, and always keeping residents first as that focus. And I know we do that, Ryan. I know you know, it's ingrained into us, but there's still so much opportunity in us getting this right and being able to be flexible. And as I was listening to this, Ryan, I'm thinking, okay, so in the past, I used to learn, like, it's okay to fail, just fail really fast. I know we're doing some work on how to fail moving forward. So I don't care what concept you want to, I don't think there's any failure here by any means. It's a foundation for us to learn from and grow from and do better. So thanks to everybody who did this, but I think I'm looking forward to like the evaluation in 6 months or 10 months after we've made some adjustments to this, and getting a sense of how we were able to respond and how beneficial it was to our residents. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner McDonough. I think that those are really, really valid points. You know, I think about, we did all this work in a course of a pandemic, when of course customers are going to go to the place they knew prior to the pandemic, right? And we changed the system midstream without a lot of information. And so I think you're right. It is about failing forward and learning from it. So I want to call in Commissioner Carter, and then Commissioner Fretham, and then McGuire and Reinhardt. So Commissioner Carter.
So again, thank you for this information. I would just want to encourage staff who are in the midst of trying to figure out whether that navigation step is a step on the way to somewhere, that again, as others have said, as time goes by, I believe it will become more and more meaningful. We are figuring out how to get out in community and get to our residents in a variety of different ways. And, you know, per the report today, we are figuring out ways that they can get to us more effectively, more efficiently, more conveniently, closer to them. And I think all of this is just so very, very good. And things do have to shake out. I agree with the concept of needing a marketing campaign, and we'll just endorse that. Of course, you all are figuring out how to get this information out in a variety of different ways. And I know that we will hear more about that. In the meantime, I do want to ask a couple of questions. It is possible that if we could get people in sites where there is a service center to kiosk or to numbers, things of that sort, that helps them to be able to conduct the business that they may have come to us to conduct. And I'm wondering if we are looking down the road at what it would take to put in a kiosk that can help direct people and get them to a service that they need. Paying property taxes is so, such an easy one to think of. Is that something that we are exploring that may become available in those centers over time? And I just really love the fact that we're thinking of navigation far beyond, a site. And so there are many ways in which navigation can become available. I'll stop on the kiosk question, and if there's anything else that you want to address regarding how we make that person that is needed more available, or that service that is needed more available.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me kick off a little bit, then Karen, Melinda, Katrina, hit clean up if I missed something. And I'll answer a couple of Commissioner McDonough's points too, because I think they fold into Commissioner Carter's, then we'll end on the kiosk specific spot, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I just want to say at the outset, as we do have this conversation, program evaluation is never meant to tell you to not move forward with the project. It's meant to tell you what's working well and where you think you are doing something well, only to find out that maybe you're not quite as great as you wish you were. And so this is all along a step of continual improvement, and the better we and organizations get at being willing to have these types of conversations, the better it ultimately becomes. So in no way does any of this make us bashful or feel like we shouldn't do it. It instead tells us like, let's move ahead and keep going. I love the part about the fail forward reference. Thank you for that. As we have begun this week, our interviews as a part of that cohort, I just want to highlight that Deputy County Manager Francois is leading a team focused on enterprise services as one of our 3 areas of work. So not only is this in concept about fail forward, we're actually using it as one of the models for the area. And we're trying to build, Karen and I just talked yesterday about this. We're trying to establish a culture from the ground up with employees in a new space where there is no 20 years of anything there to have to work through out of the gate. And so we see this fail forward opportunity as hopefully a way to do that. On the part about resident feedback, my one takeaway is that from the early stages when we said one of our goals is to take the complexity of the system and move it away from the individual and back on the system, what I see and what the navigators are often sharing in their frustration is what was otherwise left to a resident to state. I'm being sent to another door. I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do next. So maybe I'm just being too optimistic, but I see a part of that as that's a good first step along a journey. Now what we need to do is work, as has been talked about today, to equip folks here to be able to address it. But I actually think rough feedback is a direct reflection of what residents have felt for years and years and years in many circumstances, but we didn't even have the mechanism by which to fully acknowledge that. And this is that step along a journey on that. Finally, on kiosk, and I'll let Karen share more if she wants from where she sits at the Residents First sponsor table. I would only ask, kiosks require a physical location. And as we talk more and more about embedding elsewhere, a virtual service center shouldn't require you to go find a kiosk. It should be a kiosk in your pocket or at your desk that you can access from anywhere. So my personal hope, although I'm not leading this right now, is that we see it actually happen more in a web-based, app-based Residents First format. Maybe you have a kiosk at a place. Maybe it's a person at a place. But I think that's the big step we want to take. Karen, what did I miss or get wrong in that you want to clean me up on?
You didn't miss anything. I was actually glad that you brought up the fact that we're going to have a team doing the fail forward work. And it is going to be the enterprise services team. The one thing as one of the executive sponsors of Residents First that I'd like to say is that we have, from the Residents First program, invested very heavily in the navigation services and enterprise services work because we do feel that it is a huge piece of how we can become even more resident-centric in all of the work that we do. So rest assured that my colleagues, Kathy Hadeen and Joanna Berg and I are not only invested professionally in the theory of Residents First, we're invested in putting it into practice. And so we have invested heavily in funding to make sure that we are able to get better at being resident-centric.
Thank you. I just add appreciation for all that has just been shared. I do know that we are looking forward and trying to the extent possible, automate. But I do also see that one of the things we've learned early on is that residents do want choices. And so I know that there will be a continuum of ways in which we make those services available. Thank you.
I think Katrina may have wanted to respond to the kiosk question. I saw her come off muted about that time.
I would just second what Ryan and Karen, what you said. Thank you. And that Commissioner Carter must have been in a meeting with me earlier today because we were talking about exactly that in the conversation I was in earlier today. So it's definitely on our mind of how we approach that kind of kiosk idea.
Thanks. I'll turn it to Commissioner Fretham. Oh, Dana, were you going to comment? I saw you. Go ahead, Dana.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. And Commissioners McDonough and Carter, I think Ryan's point about that the navigator the issues that the navigators are seeing is being put on them many times now rather than the residents. And so one of the very early documents around this work listed one of the benefits of having a navigator is that ability to see the system from a different perspective and to be able to interact with multiple departments and all different systems, policies, and layers of government. And so as a source of knowledge, as their experience builds and their ability to see the connections and the disconnections, I think they're going to be a huge tool for our own internal learning. And where do we need to advocate up around certain federal or state policy changes or things that we can do that may be beyond our control as Ramsey County, but they're going to be in a very unique position to understand that. And so I just want to make that point that like that was in the very early documents, and just remembering to keep that part of this in here. So yeah.
Got it. Thank you. Commissioner Fretham.
Thank you. I wanted to speak to that idea a little bit as well, that and recognize for a moment our navigators who are taking this on, who maybe feel like they're not doing much, but to also honor that both the relationship when you're interacting with the resident and that sort of mental load labor that our navigators are taking on for residents has huge value for people in crisis. And I don't want to say that's good enough. Of course, you know, we're disappointed, we want to be doing more, but also not to diminish the value of standing with someone and helping them by figuring out what needs to be done, because that can become so overwhelming for folks. I have some more, and I think that speaks to also what I believe it was Karen was talking about. How do you spread that idea of navigator culture to all staff, even if they don't have the role or they're doing the work, or maybe it was Dana, just that, how can we all pick some of that up so we're not just shifting people from one door to another, we're doing the work to find them the right door. In a more kind of specific questions regarding the frustration that some of the navigators were having regarding the financial assistance services systems, it sounded like maybe they only have view access, they can't update anything. I'm just wondering, has there been conversation with Minute regarding options for security access? You know, what levels of clerk do we have? There been conversation around case banking options and restructuring some of those departments to make it easier for some of those changes people bring to move faster? And is there any conversation with other counties, because counties have such different models of financial assistance services, where you see folks either managing multiple programs for one family, or the more traditional large county model with specialized teams, and you know there are options for blending those as well. So what conversation has been done around that? Is there any foreseeable role for navigators to take on some of that work, knowing that those systems take quite a bit of training to get the security access? Or what work is being done even on the verification and documentation components of that, because that could delay processing for a lot of folks for a long time? And is there any connection between what our navigators are able to do to get things into any sort of electronic document managing system that we're operating?
Good question, Commissioner Fretham. From what I understand, so when we first started to bring on navigators, we have had some of those conversations, not necessarily with the state, but internally. And it brings about good questions that I think that also were brought up in the evaluation is what's the role of the navigator? How far do they go before they become a financial worker, for example, or other parts of the system that use data and need to document? So we haven't necessarily advocated at the state level. And I think it's a broader question that still needs to be answered internally. I know from other departments that's been brought up as well when other departments have tried to leverage different staff that use specific department data management systems. So I think it's definitely a countywide issue that needs to be talked through, and then it implicates our next steps in data management in the direction that we go.
Madam Chair, if I could just add one piece. I actually don't think it's a lack of clarity. I think this is an issue of repetition as we go. That's a bigger deal. A concierge is not a maitre d' at a restaurant, is not a sommelier, is not 9 other jobs in different types of industries, right? And they know their role is about person-centered relationship and knowledge to connection. For a system, though, that has not had that role, people default back to what they frequently know or see, which is to be one of those specific roles. The minute you try and make a navigator, a veteran services officer, a financial worker, a social worker, a mental health professional, we will have collectively failed because it's impossible to do that work. It's instead that role of being the person that alleviates complexity, brings warmth and humanity to a system that sometimes struggles with it. And I do think it's going to take a while for us to acculturate that, but I just want to say it is important, I think, for this to work, that it not become a technical job where every piece of it is implementing the role that other parts of the system should and can implement.
Can I just step in for 1 second? That's one of the reasons why I refer to it as navigation services. So our navigators are providing navigation services. They're, like Ryan said, they're not financial workers. They are providing our residents a way to help them navigate the complexity of what we do, and to help make it easier for them. So I often refer to the work that the navigators do as navigation services.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Commissioner Fretham.
Just want to ask a follow-up on that. I appreciate that. Thank you for clarifying, because I think that gets muddled sometimes in translation. In the alternative, is there discussion with some of those specialists who are doing that to create maybe dedicated lines during the day, so you're not waiting for a swing worker that has access to a bank of cases, so that when someone does come in, you can get a direct line to the worker in different programs that, you know, they are the navigation worker line to, you know, MFIP or SNAP or GRH or whatever program they're coming in for, so that you're not waiting for a phone call or just putting in a phone call, but you have, as a navigator, that line to folks who can actually do that work. And so the transition can happen a bit more quickly. That's I'm just looking for how deep can we go with navigating and making those connections and quick turnaround in services.
I'm gonna leave that one to Melinda.
So I would say, great question. Again, this gets kind of right to the heart of capacity and how we're working together within the Operations Advisory Council, and how we're starting to set up that work and to figure out what are our channels in, how can we be creative, you know, and especially as people are starting to figure out their work as they're coming back from a pandemic too. So this is the beginning of that work. We haven't gotten into very specific, but we have created some different partnerships or processes of how we would work, specifically when we're doing our work in our partner sites. We've have some of those specific channels in. It becomes more complex in the downtown service center, for example, or in other areas where work is just set up differently.
If I may add something as well, thank you, Commissioner Fretham. And one of my concerns about this project is kind of in that spirit of service, that no, all doors are the right door, or all phone numbers are the right phone number. So being careful that not that the navigators can't give great service, but does it become this thing that's the secret fast path? And so if you know to call the navigator, you get this like faster service, versus if you don't know and you come downtown or you call a phone number and you sit on hold, or you get someone who doesn't know to refer you to a navigator. How do we do both, right? And so the navigators can give excellent service, but then anyone who comes in any other door, calls any other phone number, doesn't sit on hold, or it gets the service they need as well. And I don't have the answer to that, but that was one of the in the evaluation questions about like, how does this compare to other ways of accessing services? How do we continue to build excellent customer service, resident service, regardless of how someone accesses it? So I don't know the answer to that, but that's something I've thought a lot about through my work on this project.
Thank you, Dana. I think that's a really, really valid point, because we certainly don't want to create a fast pass system by any means, but we also want to make sure people get the help that they need, however they need it and whatever that looks like. So thank you for that. I also think it's important in this conversation for us to know just how many navigators we're talking about. I asked this question, Katrina, yesterday as we were prepping for this meeting, and we're talking only about 9 to 10 navigators to manage this entire system in this kind of period. And I think that that's really telling. My second question to her is it enough? Are 9 people enough to navigate this humongous enterprise that we have? And I think the answer is probably no. But as I see Karen shaking her head as well. And so I think that also puts it in perspective in this conversation in perspective. Commissioner McGuire, you're up next.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And I love your question, Nicole. I was thinking along the same lines, like, well, then the navigator could actually serve the person if they had a direct line to this where they need help. But I totally appreciate, Dana, what you just said about not having separate systems about how you access our services. So I really appreciate this last conversation that we just had. And if I could say, Dana, congratulations on biking all the time. Oh my gosh, that's I have brothers who do that, but I'm not equipped to do that, but good job. And I'm glad someone saved you from biking in the winter. So I guess it was Chris. Anyway, I just so appreciate the work of this whole team and just pivoting so quickly. We all were so excited about these navigators, but just to see that it was working in some ways and not in others. And so to just sort of try to figure out as we're in the middle of it, fixing the plane while you're flying it kind of thing. You did a masterful job of it. So I love that we're having this conversation right now, because so many things come to my mind about, okay, how do we provide the best service? And I'm thinking about my most frustrating times when I'm trying to get access to any services. It's like when you go to the bank and you're not sure who you should talk to, but there's that person that's standing right there that says, oh yeah, you want to go talk to that person and you want to go talk to that person. It's not I wouldn't call it a navigator who knows anything about banking. They just know that you should talk to a certain person, but that if you want a copy, you should go here. If you want to drop off your coins to be counted, you put it here. If you want to drop off, shredding, go here. I mean, it's very basic customer service. So I love this idea of having someone who just navigates to the navigator. Now, without getting too many layers, but there are some basic services that maybe people that we could hire someone for that just tells people where they can get a copy made or clean out the machine and stuff. So I'm thinking about that. I also am really frustrated, and I think we all are, when we're on the phone and we have to wait, and we never can get a live person. So I know that that's a capacity issue. And maybe we don't need a navigator. We just need someone to pick up the phone. I mean, we know who we want to call, but they don't answer. So I'm so tired of calling anybody that I need help from in a not at the county, but with my credit cards, with my bank, with everybody, because I never can get a live person. So that's just some of my frustration, and I hope that we're working on that capacity as just far as getting someone on the phone that they can talk to. And I just love the fail fast and fail forward. Definitely supportive of that. But just thank you for all of your work on this. I think most of my other questions have been talked about with my colleagues. But whatever we can do to keep thinking about how we serve our residents in the best way possible, and to really explore all these options, I really support. So thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Does anyone want to respond?
I just want to ensure that if you need to call the navigator call center, you will get a live navigator quickly. And even if you're frustrated about calling your credit card company and you want to just vent to the navigator, you can call the navigator call center.
Thanks, Melinda. I appreciate that. You got a rock star team of Melinda, Katrina, Karen, Dana. Oh my gosh, I'm so proud of. I'm so happy you're all working on this. So thanks so much.
Give them a call.
Yes. Go ahead, Karen.
I just wanted to comment, Commissioner Modis-Castillo, on your comment. And it's a lot of work, and we do have capacity issues, but we've got a plan forward for that. And yes, we currently have 10 navigators, but by the end of 2021, we'll have not only 10 navigators, but we'll have 8 customer service assistants, a total of 5 supervisors, and 2 managers. So we do already have the plan that I mentioned earlier. We're, in order for us to have more hours out embedded in community, we are going to need this ramp up, and we've already started it. So rest assured that we are, and IPR is the home of continuous improvement through the Enterprise Project Management Office. We are all about continuously looking at and evaluating our work so that we can be constantly in that state of improvement.
Yeah, thank you for that. County Manager O'Connor, I see your hand up.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just two things to add. I think one, I don't want to be, well, I'm going to be this person, so I won't say I don't want to be this person. There's a significant budget outlay to adding a 25-person anything. And so while it's not 100 people, we're struggling through that part of it right now as we're trying to craft a biennial budget that's sustainable in the midst of a 0% this year and another small year next year. And that is a front and center reality. I do think that as we look at it, and I couldn't tell you where it'll come from yet, the long-term plan here, though, is that you either have to cut from departments where you already hold certain levels of concern about existing capacity, while we also probably can conceptually agree that there are inefficiencies within those systems at times. However, because I cannot necessarily point to them easily, we chose to build this part out without taking from your existing system. But as you go forward, the absolute hope here is that the calibration is not done. You may decide you want 75 navigators and you reduce your number of other employees in other spaces as the burden or the work alleviates, changes, and morphs. Out of the gate, though, we don't know what that looks like. And so what we're trying to do is monitor what happens here as we go forward and then continue to work with the board to recalibrate. You may see a future with fewer financial workers and more navigators, or fewer customer service reps somewhere else and more navigators. You may also not. And I want to acknowledge that we don't know enough yet to truly know. But as the CFO and I have been hearing budget presentations, we've been asking these questions of how do you think navigators will impact your business? Everyone says they will, but no one's willing to be the one yet to say we know it'll reduce our workload. And that's understandable, but that's where we're going to go in the next 2 years.
Okay, thank you. And Katrina.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. I was going to add on to the budget conversation, but I think between Deputy County Manager Francois and County Manager O'Connor, they've covered it quite well. I'll just second that or third, that we are continuing to build the team and are really excited, in particular, as we look at what is the staffing level post-pandemic. The current staffing level serves the need during the pandemic and as we built this up, but as we grow and adapt to meet the need of our residents, what does that look like going forward? And to that end, this kind of touches on the budget, but also on Commissioner Fetham's question about how we staff and have people that navigators can refer to and someone can access the information that they need when they need it. That's part of our evaluation of the current services we've onboarded, and where we've identified gaps and how we need to fill those gaps. And it's not just adding enterprise services or navigators, it's working with our department partners to figure out how they're structured so that we can do effective warm handoffs and not have that fast track door, but have everyone have that effective warm handoff no matter how they enter the county. So that's part of the work we're doing, and part of the essential nature of this coordination and collaboration with departments, so that we are able to effectively meet the residents' needs. And one example I'll just call out to praise Melinda and her team, but also speaks to that concierge kind of model. Not to get into specifics, but there was an individual who came into one of our service centers in the last few weeks who was not in a healthy, good place for himself at that time. And he had really struggled to get himself composed and get down to the service center to get help. And the navigator really did take that personal concierge approach. And after the navigator had gone to lunch, the individual came back and left a note thanking that individual, thanking the navigator, and being very forthcoming about he was in a really bad place. And the navigator helped him see past that, helped him figure out how he could get connected. And I just think that really, really showed the spirit of service and the type of personal kind of, for the language we're using today, that concierge role that really can help a resident see their way through a bureaucracy that has not been built to help a resident. And we're trying to solve that and help our residents.
Thank you, Katrina. And thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt, for being so patient. It is now your turn.
Thank you. Well, and some of the things that I had noted here have already been addressed. But I think I really appreciated the fact that there was such flexibility with our staff in trying to really meet people where they're at, to really customize in many ways, because one size doesn't fit all. And the acknowledgement of that throughout this presentation has been very, very clear. I do think that hoping that someone gets the not the same experience, because no two people are going to get the same experience, but the equivalent, or they feel good about where they're at and stuff. I think a lot of that depends on not really the navigator or the staff that we have, but on where that person is. And I think, Katrina, you just mentioned that. You know, oftentimes, you know, somebody can come in and go, okay, I just need to know this for my mom or whatever. And that's one place. But then there's somebody that comes in who is suffering in crisis, and, you know, may not really understand exactly what they even need. And so they're not going to have the same or equivalent experience, but probably the one that has the most severe issues is the one that's going to benefit the most as well. Such as the thank you note that came in, because that's so incredibly important. And I guess that kind of gets to the other issue, is what the role of the navigator is to assist, I would think, people getting through the system, not necessarily solving the problem. And in fact, we would have to have a whole lot more people than are even intended to come on if that's what they were supposed to do, but getting them to the place. And oftentimes I think for commissioners, when someone calls us, that's exactly what we're doing. You know, I can't answer your question, but I can find a way to get that answer to you. And so it's, I think, something that's important for the navigators, especially because it's just way too much, expecting way too much if we think that they can actually solve the problems. Maybe there are times where it's so simple they can, but that's not really the role that I see of the navigator. It's more, okay, you know, take a deep breath. This is what we need to do. This is where you can get some help. And honestly, the take a deep breath is usually probably going to be the first thing. Not that you would say that to them, but that's what your intention is, to get them to, okay, let's figure this out. Where do you need to be to get the help you need? And so as far as the, you know, how people find out about this, I think especially on our website, we should have a banner on that once we've really got this up and running fully, that basically says, if you need help navigating the system for services, this is the number. Have it be right up front. They shouldn't have to search for it, because first of all, they wouldn't know to search for navigator. So, you know, just having it right up front. And then I'm sure there are other ways in marketing that we can make sure it's like, you know, for recycling, we have 633 easy. Okay, let's do something like that for services. And again, it all depends on how you want that to be rolled out as far as staff, but there are some staff that may fit better in the navigator role, or feel more comfortable in that, or want to be in that role versus line staff in some other part of the organization. So I think getting the information out about this availability is going to be really key. And I think that we have many opportunities that we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt. And I didn't know if anyone wanted to respond to Commissioner Reinhardt's comments at all. They're all very good points.
I just want to shout out the irony to having people navigate to find the navigator is a good point, and it's one that's well taken.
Yeah.
And I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to ask if Commissioner Reinhardt was wanting to apply for a navigator role.
I think in many ways we do that as commissioners.
Yes. Well, certainly our staff. And so if you're looking at, how do you develop that role? Our staff are doing it. That's literally the calls that doing. And I know Commissioner McDonough shared, Joanne Ellis has been doing this for many years and is probably the navigator supreme who helps everyone else, right? Of who to call or which department, or sometimes you get questions and you're like, I don't even know where to start, but Joanne always knows where to go. And so if you haven't, as you're developing and improving, if you haven't included our staff, I really would encourage you to do that, because they do it organically under no formal role, but that's what they're really here to do so often. And I have one question, and we've talked a lot about, we've got partner organizations where navigators sit, but I don't know what those partner organizations are, and how do we know? Because if we do talk to constituents, or someone calls and they want to just talk to a person or meet someone in their community, I don't know where to send them. So where would we find that list? Where is that posted? Can you share who those partner organizations are?
So currently, I can take this one if that makes sense, Commissioner.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So currently, our partner locations are the shelters that that Ramsey County operates, and the St. Paul Opportunity Center. And we've already connected to, but are continuing to develop what that'll look like at additional partner locations. For example, I know one that Melinda and her team were talking with just recently was Regions Hospital. So how do we partner with health partners in regions? I think a great example of that is also to get to the rest of health partners and their clinics where residents may be going, but specifically with regions. And, we already have county staff that is going to regions from FAS and from social services. So how do we all work together to have that value add for individuals at regions that may be helped by county services? So that's one example. I know we've also talked about and have reached out to a number of religious organizations, other community partners like Neighborhood House. But to this point, there hasn't been a lot of traffic to those locations. So there hasn't been a whole lot of opportunity to partner with them during the pandemic, but now that's changing. So now we're seeing an increased level of interest and an increased desire to partner with those organizations and figure out, does that make sense to do a virtual partnership? Because is that how the resident might be connecting with that organization? And they just, to Ryan's point, is that how they're going to navigate to our navigators? Because that's the organization they know. I know that we want to get away from navigating to navigators, but if they go to their church, and that's their community connection, and their church knows how to connect them to the county, then we want to leverage that connection. But if it's that they go to their to HAP, and we can actually be at Hmong American Partnership 1 day a week, 2 day a week, is it that kind of partnership? So my point is that it'll depend on the community partner, how we want to structure that partnership.
And then do we have a website? Do we have a place to find location and hours? Because I think that's really important too. Sometimes if we're out, doing outreach or we're in the community, we might get stopped and someone asks a question and we want to be able to say, you can go right there on Tuesday at noon and someone will be there to help you, right? But we don't know what those places or those times because it's a moving target, which doesn't make it easy for us to refer. So if there's a place or a location, I think that would be really helpful as a follow-up. You don't have to do it right now, but a follow-up to our staff as well, just for our information, and that we can also share through our media networks, where those might be. All right, we are at time, and so I'm wondering if there's any closing comments. Commissioner Reinhardt, sorry, I see your hand is up. It was blending into your background. Is that your hand up? Maybe not. Oh, okay. Any closing comments then?
I just wanted to say thank you to Dana and Melinda and Katrina. I thought one of the other planners was here, but great job pulling this together. Really great recommendations. Like I said, IPR is the home in Ramsey County to continuous improvement. And it was also where Residents First came from. The IPR modernization program grew into Residents First. So, this is a great location for this work to be happening. We've got great partnerships with all of our, with the other service teams and the other departments. And so it's going to be really important, our next evaluation, because as we stated earlier, this particular evaluation covered a period of time before enterprise services was operationalized and before we hired the permanent manager, the permanent navigators, supervisors, and customer service assistants. So I'm really looking forward to that next evaluation to help us to continuously evaluate and improve the way we deliver services to our residents. So thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners, for this opportunity. We look forward to coming back with more at another time.
Thank you, Karen. And I hope that even in one, since you're the Department of Continuous Improvement, I'm hoping that our navigators are also collecting where they see we can improve the bureaucracy, right? And so instead of having navigators help people get through something hard, let's also change the system so it's not so hard as well. And I'm hoping that we're getting that feedback from the navigators. And Dana, you can write that question down, is how would they change the system to make it more accessible? And so I really appreciate it. And Katrina, welcome to this new role. I know you are a champion of collecting titles across the county and positions, but I'm hoping you'll stay here for a little while. You have as many roles here at the county as my kids have Pokemon cards, I think, but we're glad you're here and you'll stay put for a while.
Thank you. I hope to stay put for a while.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon. We're adjourned.
Thanks. Great job. Good job, Trista. Thanks,
Nice
everyone.
meeting.
Good job.